ago, Donald Trump was saying, he wanted everything to be back open by Easter. Obviously, that hasn't happened. And now I've been hearing talk of late July.
Can I just really quick before we get to the Andrew Cuomo thing? This is like psychological torture of the whole country. It's like sitting in an airport where every 25 minutes you get a message that says your flight has been delayed, and you're trying to decide, should I book a hotel room? Do I have enough time to go stop at the Hooters and get dinner, or should I just sit here and wait? 25 minutes is not enough for dinner. And then 25 minutes later they say your flight's been delayed another 30 minutes, and you go, oh fuck, I could have had dinner. Should I go now? Will it be delayed again? And this happens all day, and you're afraid to leave your spot to even unplug your phone from the wall outlet that you're able to secure. And you don't know when your flight's going to leave, or if it's going to be canceled, or if you should get a hotel room, or what you should do. And I feel like the amount of psychological damage this is causing in the country is so massive, but incalculable. Nobody knows next whether their governor or the president's going to come on and tell you, never mind, you're in here, you're home till December, or whether they're going to tighten the lockdown or loosen it, or say next month or next week or whatever. They just keep making it 30 days. We've become Jerry and George and Elaine and Kramer waiting in the Chinese restaurant and being told every time we ask when our table's ready, 5-10 minutes. Because they know that's just the amount of time that we can handle. They're not going to tell us indefinitely. They're going to tell you 30 days. And then 28 days later, they're going to say, just 30 more days. Sorry, I'm stuck in my house. I'm climbing the walls, and I got people every 10 minutes telling me how, oh, did you know there's this curve? And I don't know if you understand.
You got to flatten that curve.
We need to flatten the curve. As if I don't understand this every time I complain about having to wait 30 minutes in line at Stop and Shop to buy food because now they're only letting one person in the store in at a time because of social distancing. So, we can't. So we have to wait outside in line in the rain so we don't get sick. I feel like I'm living in a country. This country has become I said this the other day, I feel like I'm living on one of those farms that's run by a cult. So I'm on the farm. And they all know, oh, Dan's not in the cult, but, he lets us do our cult thing and we don't bother him. And at night we use the barn and we light all of our candles and we sacrifice a goat. And, I find it creepy, but I just don't get involved. And I'm starting to come to this realization that, these people on the farm with their masks outnumber me. And at any minute they could turn on me and they could sacrifice me instead of that goat. Yes. And it's very unsettling. I'm starting to feel like I need to leave the farm.
Yeah, there's also one thing. If what we're just trying to do is flatten the curve, and the assumption is that what we're trying to do is simply we've resigned to the fact that we're all going to get it, but we want to do it in such a way that we don't overwhelm the medical system, then this indefinite thing is whatever. But if we're waiting for a vaccine, if we are waiting for herd immunity, then what we really ought to be doing is going outside and catching it.
We need to open the schools.
Yes.
As much as I hate the schools, we need to get children congregating together so they can spread this thing.
Yeah, if this is about herd immunity, then I'm walking outside right now.
Which, by the way, herd immunity is 2 words all these vaccine people have suddenly vanished. It's vanished from their lips.
Yeah.
I cannot tell you how many times I have smugly had herd immunity explained to me by the same people who are explaining flattening the curve to me now.
Yeah, it has to be one or the other.
It's like, hey guys, you're right. I believe you now. I listened. We need herd immunity.
We need herd immunity. I'm going right outside. I'm 24 years old. I'm overweight, but my lungs are healthy. So I'm going outside right now.
And suddenly, if you mention herd immunity to these NPC isn't good enough, to these drones, if you mention herd immunity to them, they look at you like you're that crazy aunt who says, oh, I have essential oils for that. It's like a herd immunity. What are you talking about? Cutting people open and using leeches to get the virus out of them? It's like, this is what you people were telling me about when I said I didn't want, some vaccine or whatever for the flu that's going to just give me the flu anyway.
Okay, so let's return back to, this is a perfect segue, speaking of, the story changing. So,
No, real quick, I'm sorry, but I have to say this real quick, because you just said about the story changing.
Okay.
This is like when we went into Iraq, and they said, we're there for WMDs. And then when it became clear there were no WMDs, they just said, well, we're there because we have to create democracy in Iraq. Everyone knows that. That's why we've always been there. The idea of this was to flatten the curve, which means like you said, spread out. Let me explain to you, listeners. I don't know if you know, there's a curve, right? We have to flatten it. And the way you flatten the curve is you spread out how long the disease is whatever. The transmission rate, so it doesn't happen in one big spike, right? Instead of a big pointy spike, it's a flatter spike that takes longer. But doesn't that mean there's a certain point at which we can say, oh, wow, we've already had enough cases that now we can stop social distancing because enough of those cases have been handled that now the rest of them won't overwhelm the system, right? Doesn't that mean there's a point at which you can say, even though there's a lot of people who are still going to get it, we're done now because the curve has been flattened enough that even with the spike that's going to come from letting everyone go back to work, it'll be enough for our healthcare systems to deal with. Which
that would, just to note, that would not be at the point where the curve is flat. That would be at the point where it's already sloping downwards.
Yeah, not where the curve is flat, but the point at which
I would say it would be at the point where the curve, I think, is either halfway down or I think a third of the way down.
Yes, and then the important thing to remember is using the models that they use to predict this, we've already beaten that point. If this is a war, we can declare victory and go home. We can finish.
Mission accomplished.
Mission accomplished. All you got to do
if Donald Trump really wants to inspire hope, he'll stand on an aircraft carrier with Mission Accomplished in the background until we beat Corona.
If Donald Trump, all he has to do to reopen the economy is to give a press conference. He needs 2 slides on a PowerPoint project. One is the projection of the original curve. Here's what was going to happen even with social distancing. Here's where we thought we'd be at this point. And then the new curve of what it is now. And you say, here's where we are now. Mission accomplished. We're good. Everyone back to work. That's all you have to do. It's over. The fake virus is over. Tell me about Andrew Cuomo. I'm sorry.
Let's go back. So Donald Trump was asked, can you force a governor to reopen their state economy, even if they say that they don't want to? And Donald Trump said
no, because the Constitution is something he cherishes, right?
Right. Yeah. Donald Trump reiterated one of the founding ideals of the Republican Party. He said, when somebody is president of the United States, the authority is total. Having to do with the subject we're talking about, the authority is total. And you could hear the stupefaction in the voice of the reporter that asked the question. They're either like, total? And you could hear the murmuring, right, of distress and confusion among the.
They did the John Stossel inquisitive voice.
Right? And you hear a lot of people are asking, like, what makes you think that it's total? And then one person says, have you asked the governors about this total authority? And Donald Trump says, I don't ask anybody's permission because I don't need to. That's what it means to have total authority. And of course, this made some people very, very distressed. And it got to the point where it started that very day when Huffington Post ran an article saying that the Constitution gives the states, not the federal government, the police power to enforce order and regulate public behavior during a public health crisis. And it had a link, and I said, where in the hell in the Constitution does it say anything? I've never even heard the word police power and public health crisis in the Constitution. What were they citing? Well, if you listen to this podcast, you'll say, oh, the 10th Amendment. The 10th Amendment! Huffington Post? Most libertarians don't bother citing the 10th Amendment. Do you know who cites the 10th Amendment? Michael Bolden of the 10th Amendment Center.
Have you heard that Tom Woods has talked about this? I think it's from Kevin Gutzman who said this, that one of the pieces of advice that was given when studying for the bar exam is that whenever one of the multiple choice answers is the 10th Amendment, that's not the one.
Yeah.
On any question, if one of the 4 multiple choice answers is the 10th Amendment, then it's really only got 3 choices. The 10th Amendment is never the answer.
And so then Governor Andrew Cuomo, Democrat in New York, on CNN, he said,
we had this argument. It was done a long time ago. People by the name of Hamilton and Jefferson and Madison and Washington, and they concluded this. They wrote a document that's called the Constitution of the United States, and it is an explicit and intricate balance of power between the federal government and the state governments. And it says the federal government does not have absolute power. It says the exact opposite that the president said. It says that would be a king. And remember, the colonies created the federal government. The states created the federal government, not the other way around. We have the 10th Amendment that is explicit. Certain responsibilities are state responsibilities. So the president should not even think of going there. That would be divisive and political And it would be totally contrary to everything we've been trying to do by working in a cooperative fashion. If he ordered me to reopen in a way that would endanger the public health of the people of my state, I wouldn't do it. And we would have a constitutional challenge between the state and the federal government, and that would be the worst possible thing he could do at this moment.
That is not alluding to states' rights. That is that is unequivocal, unambiguous. That is the boldest, clearest declaration, summarization of the states' rights argument that has ever been given by a mainstream politician anywhere in public in 50 years. That is, Ron Paul probably could not have said it better.
And the timing is perfect because now that Tulsi's gone, the moral minority needed.
We have a new favorite Democrat. Candidate. I am now endorsing Andrew Cuomo, the only Democrat still who supports states' rights. And he said this on CNN.
Andrew Cuomo came out as a Dixiecrat today.
Right, Andrew Cuomo came out as a Dixiecrat today. The last gasp of...
Who would have thought? Andrew Cuomo.
New York Italian Catholic Andrew Cuomo championing the lost cause of the South. I mean, this isn't just the best argument that anybody's heard for states' rights in 50 years. This is probably the only one. If you grew up in the New York State public school system, you would not have heard this. And I know this because I grew up in the New York State public school system. My first primer on the idea of states' rights from somebody who wasn't rolling their eyes at how backwards and racist you have to be to believe in it came from an episode of the Tom Woods Show.
Yeah.
Okay. CNN just nodded in docile agreement, right? Go merrily along like, yeah, that makes sense. And Cuomo doubled down. During his press briefing, he actually had a quote from Alexander Hamilton that he pulled up right there on the screen. And let me just read off the quote. He said, this quote is basic federalism. He says, the state governments possess inherent advantages which will ever give them an influence and ascendancy over the national government and will forever preclude the possibility of federal encroachments. That their liberties can be subverted by the federal head is repugnant to every rule of political calculation.
Quarantine now, quarantine tomorrow, quarantine forever.
Exactly. That's a really good joke. I should have thought of it first.
Well, you know.
Here are some outlets that have seconded Andrew Cuomo's unambiguous rejection of federal supremacy. USA Today, Axios, CNN, NBC, and National Review have all run articles saying that Cuomo is right. It's all about the 10th Amendment. It's all about states' rights. Now, you may think to yourself, well, Cuomo's argument is just so obviously correct that even the most committed federal supremacists can't possibly argue against it. So it's just a stopped clock, Marcel. Why are you mad? You should be happy that clearly there's a standard. Here's the problem with this. 5 minutes earlier, in that same briefing, he announced the formation of a regional strategy. It was New York, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Delaware, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and Connecticut, right? And he said, quote, the virus doesn't understand state boundaries. The virus can get on Amtrak. The virus can get on a plane. The virus can get on a car and drive up I-95. We're all connected. In other words, Andrew Cuomo acknowledged with his own mouth that there's a direct relationship between pandemic response and interstate commerce, and he still maintained that this was a matter over which the federal government had no authority. Andrew Cuomo is not just a states' rights champion. Andrew Cuomo is a states' rights extremist. Has anybody called Andrew Cuomo a neo-Confederate? I haven't seen it.
No, you won't see that.
Is the National Guard going to drag Andrew Cuomo kicking and screaming from out in front of a Family Dollar? I don't think so. This is really, really, this is amazing. And this just goes to show, this wasn't something, Andrew Cuomo did not get this hastily handed to him. It wasn't as though Andrew Cuomo was like, oh, Donald Trump is going to try to exercise authority over me. Shit. I need somebody, weren't there arguments about this? Like, what were some of the old Southerners' arguments? Like, somebody give me a quick summary of this and I'll see if I can make that palatable. No, that was perfect. He gave a perfect summary, right? That's not a New Yorker's filtered, caricature of, that is the argument for states' rights.
I've heard the automatic assumption for Trump as 3D chess player, right? The 3D chess filter on this would say that, well, what Trump is doing here is he wants to reopen the country, and he wants like plausible deniability,